back to One More Mana. My name's Derek, and today we are getting into another deck tech. We're actually taking a detour from Ikoria just for a minute. Don't worry, we're coming back. We're coming back. But actually, I said deck tech. This is actually going to be kind of a blend between those deck updates and a deck tech. It's a paper deck I've had for a while that I've done a deck tech on that has completely changed form over the course of a year-ish, something like that. So the deck I'm referencing was one of my favorites, and that was the Yawgmoth Brand Physician deck tech I did a while back. Yawgmoth is one of my favorite characters in Magic lore, and I think y'all probably remember how ecstatic I was that they printed him onto a card. Thing was, I loved the deck. It was super fun. It was just a little more powerful than I was going for. With Yawgmoth, there were times where once you got a board state, you were able to just sack so many cards, get into these loops, draw all these cards, proliferate, and you could just win very combo-y. Nothing wrong with that at all. It was not my style of how I wanted a deck to play out. So I've been trying to find a new head of that deck to have a similar style, but just be able to play in a style that I'm more comfortable playing. And there were a number of options. I wanted to stay mono black, and I looked at things like Erebos to have, just that mono black good stuff type deck. Even Bantu was an option because you still have that sacking part of the deck that I really, really enjoyed to get value. And a lot of different cards kind of were there temporarily, but I finally found one that was just so perfect. And that commander is Yahenni, Undying Partisan. Before we get too far into Yahenni, there's some awesome pieces of goodness in this deck. Anything you see you might want, head on over to TCGPLAYER.com. TCGPLAYER is absolutely amazing, even with all the craziness in the world right now. My Magic addiction never goes away. And thanks to TCGPLAYER, I've still been putting together decks. You can find anything at all that you need on there. If you use that affiliate link down below, it'll help support the channel, help us get out more and better content. We really, really do appreciate the help. Now getting right back into Yahenni. Yahenni is 2 in black for a 2/2 vampire with haste, instant speed sack outlet to make Yahenni indestructible, and also throwing a +1 counter onto Yahenni whenever an opponent's creature dies. And we're mono black, so we're going to be making opponents' creatures die a lot. Now, obviously from what I said before, this was the deck that was Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth became this, essentially. So there are some comparisons I want to make just to show how the deck building changed and why I made that transition. So with Yawgmoth, Yawgmoth has everything on it. It's got sack outlet, it's got card draw, it's got removal, it's got proliferate. It's everything. It's a whole deck on a card. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to switch, because for me, it just did a little too much. But now for Yahenni, it has that sack outlet, so we can still use those sack for value strategies, but we need other pieces to make it work. So right away, a lot of those same strategies are just going to be in here. We're going to run a lot of tokens. We're going to run a lot of recursive creatures to have that. Now, while the ceiling isn't going to be as high, this deck is not like Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth was very combo-tastic and went out of nowhere, was explosive. This deck may be more consistent at times because Yahenni can basically always be out. Having at times indestructible commander is awesome, and you can really count on it being there more often. It's a pain to remove. But while before we used those sack strategies and everything for value throughout the game, and then just bam, try to explode with some crazy combo, usually involving Infect. Now we're going to go ahead, use that sack value throughout the game, and at the end of it, instead of some crazy combo killing everybody, we have this massive vampire we can swing at people. If y'all know anything about me, I love big dumb creatures, so this is taking a lot of the positives, I should say, from Yawgmoth, and instead of having a more combo-y way, it's bringing straight combat damage into it. And I've loved my experiences with it so far, because I get all those cool, weird sack, Grave Pact effects, which we'll get into. But at the end of it, you get a massive creature to swing with, and it's kind of everything I want from a deck. Now, quick little aside before we get too far into all the categories, you're going to notice a lot of overlap with that Yawgmoth deck. But the interesting part was I didn't just take the Yawgmoth deck and just transition it over immediately. I was actually putting together a Yahenni deck just for fun, for no real reason, with no intention of building it in paper. And once I started putting it together and noticed it really wanted a lot of those same cards, was when I was like, this is perfect. I've been looking for a new commander for that deck. It was just such an easy transition. So a lot of this overlap happened naturally. It wasn't just, oh, I already got these cards, let me just switch commander. It's the same deck. This actually was a ground up deck that I built, and it just so happens that as I went through it, a lot of those cards just want to be in both decks. So getting into the creatures, there are a lot of awesome categories of things to look at. We always want to have sack fodder available, and there's different ways we can go about that. We can go the route of just having recursive creatures, so stuff like Endless Cockroaches, stuff like Bloodghast, stuff like Reassembling Skeleton. All these cards are great because it doesn't matter how many times they die, they just keep coming back again and again and again, and it makes sure we can have creatures that we can go ahead and sack. They're also non-token, which can be important with certain cards in the deck as far as, card draw, different things like that. So it's great to have these effects. Now, tokens are also great, and we're not going to run as many token effects that we had in the Yawgmoth deck, but we're going to have really the biggest ones. Stuff like Abhorrent Overlord, Endrick Sar, Chittering Witch, which is a newer card, is great. Obviously, the best token producer is going to be a card like Grave Titan, where you can just keep getting those tokens over and over again. There's so many great value token generators in black, and we can just pick and choose the best ones, because we don't want all-out tokens, but we want enough to have them available. We also want to have removal on our creatures. We want a lot of creatures, and we want a lot of removal. So especially when it can be mass removal, it can be insane. Stuff like Demon of Dark Schemes or something like a Massacre Worm can be ridiculous in the deck. Dropping one of these against a token deck would just be the dream, because you could just make Yahenni massive, kill all their stuff, and also, just have the value of either draining them or being able to reanimate stuff. These cards are crazy, and just getting these board wipe effects onto creatures. Now, obviously, -2 won't always be a board wipe, but there are enough cases where it can be just like a huge swing in your direction that completely worth it. And the best thing about it is we're in mono black, so all those black mana symbols don't hurt us at all. Priest of Forgotten Gods is also an insane card in the deck. It ramps you, draws you cards, it helps remove other creatures. This card is absolutely ridiculous. I've only gotten it out once so far in a game, and it can run a game. It can put people in a situation where they just don't feel safe playing any creatures. And obviously, Big Daddy Yawgmoth himself is in the deck. Couldn't leave Yawgmoth out. Yawgmoth is still one of the most powerful cards in the deck, even just in the 99. And for flavor purposes, I feel like at this point you don't want to build a mono black deck without Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth is the king of mono black and is just such a beast in the deck. Now, getting into the artifacts, I didn't go super equipment heavy, because while there are Voltron aspects to the deck, it's not a straight up just tons of equipment, put it on Yahenni, swing and kill. Yahenni can already pump itself so much. You only need the all-stars of equipment in the deck. So stuff like Blade of the Blood Chief, which not only does it count tokens, but it counts your creatures. Our commander's a sack outlet. It can get massive fast. And oh yeah, it's a vampire too. It gets silly with this card. A newer card, Shadow Spear, just seems ridiculous in the deck, because Trample is something that in general black struggles to get. You need equipment for that. The lifelink doesn't hurt, but the fact that you can get rid of things indestructible and hexproof is just insane, because our commander cares about destroying things. We want to be able to target or remove people's creatures. We're mono black, that's kind of what we do. And having this ability to get rid of that hexproof and indestructible on such a cheap artifact is insane. And then two cards that have been overperforming for me the most so far have been two of the swords, and no, not the insanely expensive old swords, but the newer ones, Sinew and Steel and Truth and Justice. They have the same protection aspects of the older swords, but these just fit into this deck so well. The Truth and Justice puts more +1 counters on our commander and lets us proliferate, which may matter later. And Sinew and Steel allows us to remove artifacts. Mono Black struggles removing artifacts and enchantments, and enchantment removal is still a problem. But having a card like this, that you can get repeated artifact removal, is insane in Mono Black. It is such an awesome effect. And just a little sprinkle on top of every once in a while being able to remove a Planeswalker. We want our commander swinging at people's faces because we want to get commander damage in. And not having to waste swings at Planeswalkers to destroy it with this is great. Jumping into the enchantments, zero surprises about Dictate of Erebos or Grave Pact. It's a very sack-heavy deck. We want value from our sacrificing. And a card that really takes advantage of that as well is going to be a card like Vampiric Rites. It's going to get us card draw. And because, again, Yahenni isn't the single card engine that Yawgmoth was, we need cards like Vampiric Rites to go ahead and kind of almost build our own Yawgmoth. It makes it a little bit more of a puzzle, and it's really why I love the deck. We need little pieces like this to make up for what Yahenni lacks. I also absolutely love Pestilence in this deck. One, we make our commander indestructible, pump whatever into it, just wipe the board to make our commander huge, swing, and do our thing. But also, I love the fact that we can just damage players. Even though it damages us too, a lot of commander games can go way too long, and a card like this, pumping mana into it every turn, really can kind of speed up the process of the game while still forwarding your strategy, so it's great. With the sorceries, we're going to have some board wipes, obviously, in Decree of Pain and Deadly Tempest, but the thing I love so much about Deadly Tempest is when you're playing a deck like this, really our biggest enemy is token decks, because the whole Grave Pact Edict effect thing really doesn't hurt token decks too much. And we have a Voltronish commander, and token decks have plenty of blockers, so having something like a Deadly Tempest in there to punish those decks is phenomenal, kind of similar to with the Massacre Worm and Demon of Dark Schemes before. Finale of Eternity is also an awesome card, and this is the first chance I'm getting to play it. It hasn't made its way into a deck before, but it's multiple creature removal, which is great for our commander, with the potential upside of just throwing our graveyard onto the battlefield. The finales have been so much fun in my experience so far. I remember when they were first printed, it's kind of iffy on them. I've played with the blue one and the green one a ton so far, and now I'm starting to play this one, and they are just amazing. They're tons and tons of fun. I just love anything that flexible that gives you, there's an upside if you play it early if you need it, but then having that late game payoff of the X of 10 or greater, the flexibility just makes it such a fun card to play because every time you play it, you might get something different. Now in the instance, two of the most important cards in the entire deck are in here. One is going to be Scour from Existence, the most inefficient removal ever, but in mono black we need it. We can exile a permanent for 7 mana at instant speed. This gets around so many of the weaknesses of black, not to mention black and ramp so heavy that 7 mana isn't as impossible to get to as it may be in other decks. Sudden Spoiling is another card that just makes you feel so good when you have it, because it's protection on one end. If someone has a crazy board, you can protect yourself, but it also allows people's creatures to be removed. If someone has a crazy board of just insane creatures, and maybe you have that Demon of Dark Schemes, this will make them essentially just useless creatures. It gets rid of a lot of their effects, so if you do want to wipe the board and they got something out that is trying to stop you from doing that, so maybe a Blood Artist or something, this is something that can get around it. This is one of those cards that gets around situations that would otherwise just be inescapable, and it is so amazing that it has split second. It's such a powerful card. I died to it a few times before I realized I needed to start running it, and I feel like this deck is the perfect place for it. Now with the lands, it's going to be whatever kind of you can afford, essentially. Mono Black has a ton of ramp, so Cabal Coffers is a phenomenal card, but you don't need it in the deck for it to function by any means. If you have one, put it in there. Cabal Stronghold actually does a decent imitation when running so many swamps that it's actually a really powerful card in the deck. Shizo just got reprinted, so it's a little bit more affordable than it used to be, and it is a tremendous effect. But a better effect than that for even cheaper is going to be a Rogue's Passage, because it just straight up makes Yahenni unblockable. And again, I mentioned lack of trample. Well, unblockable makes up for that. But really with the mana base, you can just run all swamps technically, and it's not going to be that bad. Mono Black has other ways to ramp, other ways to do things. It's going to be whatever's in your budget to make that land base as powerful as you want, so you can get some suggestions from the deck list, but really even just all swamps in a Cabal Stronghold. You know, throw in a Crypt of Agadeem too, that's pretty budget, and the card's pretty broken in here. Throw those in, but yeah, you don't need to worry about a crazy expensive mana base for the deck. That's going to do it for all the categories. Now let's see how we're about to win the game in this deck. Now this first way is going to be no surprise to anyone, but we're going mono black. We need some ways to kill off some longer games, and that's going to be with a card like Exsanguinate. Now I've gotten to the point, I may have said something different in the past, I'm at the point now where I strongly prefer Exsanguinate to Torment of Hellfire, just because Torment just leads to some very long decision making, and it's not that it's always bad, but Exsanguinate is pretty straightforward. You know how much life they're losing and you're gaining it back. So that's kind of my go-to finisher. It's a great card in mono black. I've taken it out of a lot of other decks, but in this deck it is kind of a necessary way to end long games. Now the second way to win the game in this deck is going to be smacking people in the face with Yahenni. Commander damage is going to be great in this deck, and I love it because I don't really play many other decks where commander damage matters. You can definitely go in a Yahenni deck the route where Blood Artist type effects, Zulaport, Cutthroat, those type of effects, and draining the table is how you do it. That was kind of what I was trying to get away from with Yahenni as opposed to Yawgmoth. Nothing against Aristocrats, just not really my style. So I like benefiting from that sacking of creatures in other ways, but as a finisher, I want Yahenni to be smacking people, and that's how I want to benefit from a lot of these creature killing effects. And Yahenni's going to be able to do that with some of the equipment we have, some of the board wipes we have, and just being a haste, potentially indestructible creature. There's a lot of situations where getting in for commander damage is super realistic in the deck. And now the third way to win the game should be zero surprise to anyone. We are taking our weekly trip to Phyrexia. And now, you know, just because I was replacing Yawgmoth, the deck still has its roots in Phyrexia and still loves all things Phyrexian. And I really think Yahenni will adopt the Phyrexian way just fine. There are a number of cards that I left out going over the categories that kind of gave this away. We're running Skittles in the creature slot, which is kind of weird because it's the only infect creature. Now the reason for this is you can get some infect damage in early with something like Phyresis or Glistening Oil or Tainted Strike on Yahenni. You can get 4, 5, 6 points of infect. We also have some equipment to buff up creatures, and why not just move some of those equipment over to Skittles? Skittles is a phenomenal way to get some infect points out of nowhere. And in a deck that's only running a few infect cards, I found it to be really crucial to be able to have that, plus it's kind of a pet card. But the other infect cards are, in all honesty, 1, way cheaper, and 2, way more important. So we're going to focus on those. Glistening Oil, Tainted Strike, and Phyresis. These are amazing. I'm actually leaving out Grafted Exoskeleton just because 4 to play and then 2 to... It's a lot of mana. It's a little too mana intensive for me, and I'd rather be able to give infect a little more out of nowhere and a little more, mana efficient. Yahenni is just asking for this because it's great. Because Getting it to 21 is a bit of a chore, but getting your commander anywhere near 10 is so easy to do. Not to mention, we're mono black. We got some crazy big flying scary demons to play, so we can just slap this onto any of our creatures. You're going to end up playing against life gain decks. You're going to end up in situations where if somebody's life total is just too high to get in one turn and they're about to kill you, and Infect is the best way to get around that. It's much less combo-y than it was with the Yawgmoth, so it feels much more fair. There were times in Yawgmoth where infecting people just got too easy, and it was almost every game was ending with everyone just choking on poison, which I love, but I wanted to be a little bit more of a challenge, and having the forced combat into it where you can't just put poison counters and proliferate. Now the fact that we do have to attack, we have to connect, it makes poisoning people out a little bit more challenging and a lot more rewarding. The way this deck uses Infect, I feel like is both fair, also very powerful. It's a really nice balance that I've seen so far, whereas I've said this a million times, dedicated Infect decks are too weak. I found Yawgmoth to be a little bit too powerful. This finds that happy medium of using Infect, I feel like, a fun and flavorful way, and makes this deck a blast to play. And when you look through this deck list, speaking of ways to win, it's mono black, so you have so many big, stompy, efficient creatures, so many value creatures. There's plenty of ways to win. If the games do grind on, these are the most easy ways, essentially. These are the quickest ways to win the game. But you're going to have so many powerful cards in mono black that you will find a variety of ways to win in the deck, even though it is focused around Yahenni. And that's going to do it for today's deck tech. I know everything is going crazy with Ikoria right now. I had to take a quick detour. But we're coming right back. Don't worry. There's plenty of Ikoria stuff to come. I've just been having so much fun with this deck recently. I could not do a deck tech on it. It's absolutely a blast to play. As always, huge shout out to all the patrons. We love and appreciate y'all so much. Tons of stuff to come. But until then, I will see y'all next time.